Today I wanted to go over some examples of um, actually converting some of these metric um, units. So to quickly go over once again, if we're going from a bigger unit to a smaller unit, we have to multiply. A smaller unit to a bigger unit, we have to divide. It's the opposite of what you would normally think, where bigger to smaller would be dividing and smaller to bigger would be multiplying. So this is the opposite of what we would normally do. So you can think of conversions like that and be like, oh yeah, it's the opposite. Okay? Then we're going to go into 1 meter equals 100 centimeters. Now, cm is for centimeters. 1 kilogram, a lot of times it'll just be kg for kilogram, equals 1,000 grams. And 1 liter for 1,000 milliliters or ml. Okay? So you have to memorize this. To be honest, if you're taking a test, it might be a good idea to just write this stuff down on your scrap paper, so you can always, or just on the test itself, so you can always just reference it back, because it's always good. It's really easy to get confused on the bigger to smaller multiply and smaller to bigger divide, to be honest. I still do it sometimes just because it's counterintuitive. It's not what you would usually expect because of how uh, numbers work, and typically when you go from a smaller to bigger, you're going to multiply, but in conversions it's the opposite. But let's just get to the examples here. So right now we're at 250 milliliters equals how many liters? Okay, so 250 milliliters equals blank liters. A lot of times liters will just be L, capital L. So we're going from I know that since there's 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter, that means that the liter is actually more, right? So this is another way that conversions are the opposite, where when you have the conversion rate 1,000 to 1, the actual 1,000, or the number that has the bigger number, is actually the smaller unit. So we're going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit, which means we have to divide. And divide by what? We're dividing by 1,000. So to divide by 1,000, we have to move the decimal place over, and we're moving it by the amount of zeros that are in 1,000. So that's 3. So all we're doing is we're moving it 1, 2, 3. So the decimal is now there. So the answer would be 250 250 thousandths, or we can just take off this last zero, it doesn't really matter, or 25 hundredths liters. Now I do want to just quickly go over, if this was 25 milliliters equals how many liters, we would still move the decimal place over 3 times, but it would be 1, 2, and then here, there's no number here. So anytime you move the decimal place in either way, and there's no number here, you would put a 0 here. So in this case, it would be 0, 25 thousandths, or 0.025 liters. So I just wanted to point that out. But basically, for all of these, since the metric system is done off of tens, right? 100, 10, 1,000, 100, it's all 10 tens, base 10 numbers. That means we're just moving the decimal place over. Either to the right for multiplying or to the left. So now we have 3 liters equals blank milliliters. So we're just multiplying 3, a liter, by 1,000, right? because we're going from a bigger unit to a smaller unit, and the conversion rate is 1,000, so it's just 3 times 1,000, and if you know the trick, you can just add 3 zeros, but I also want to just point out that you can also move the decimal place 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And like I said, anytime that you move it over and there's no number there, you just put a 0 there, and it becomes 3,000 milliliters. And I only say that because if you come up, we'll address it over here, but you can't just add zeros if the number is a decimal. Okay? So that would be 3,000 milliliters is 3 liters. Let's go for 743 grams. Or G equals how many kilograms? So we're going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit, so we're going to divide. And since kilograms into grams is the conversion rate is 1,000, then we need to divide by 1,000. And to divide by 1,000, we're just moving the decimal place over 3. And dividing means to the left, so it would be 1, 2, 3, and then it would be 0.743 or 743 thousandths kilograms. Okay? Pretty easy. Not too hard. Now, we're going to do 2.4 kilograms, or 2 4/10 kilograms, equals how many grams? So all we're doing is now we're going from a bigger unit to a smaller unit, so we're going to multiply by 1,000 because there's 1,000 grams in a kilogram. So 2.4 times 1,000. So what I need to do is I need to move this decimal place over 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay? And that means that I have to fill this out here, and the decimal's over here, so that is 2,400 grams. Now, if you were to try to just use the trick where you just add the amount of zeros here, right? I move the decimal place over 3 times because there are 3 zeros, but if I were to just say, oh, I just add 3 zeros to this, that actually doesn't change the value at all because the zeros are after the decimal place, so it actually is still 2.4, so 2 4/10 kilograms is obviously not 2 4/10 grams. So you need to remember to just move the decimal place as opposed to just adding zeros, because with a decimal, just adding zeros is not going to work. So let's go to the next one. 250 centimeters equals how many meters? Okay, so we're going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit. So, right, because there's 100 centimeters in a meter. And so we are going to move the decimal place. Smaller to bigger, we're going to divide. And we're only moving it, since it's 100 and not 1,000, we're only moving the decimal place 2. So the answer would be 2 5/10 meters, right? Or, I mean, you could put the 0 here. It doesn't change the value, 2 50 hundredths meters. But typically you would just drop the 0 and it would be 2 5/10. And for the last one, let's do 37 meters equals how many centimeters? So we are going from a bigger unit to smaller unit, so we're going to multiply, and we're multiplying by 100. So to multiply by 100, I'm going to move the decimal place over 2 times. So, and if there's no number where you're moving the decimal place, you just add a 0 there, and then it becomes 3,700, or 3,700 centimeters is 37 meters. So hopefully that will give you a pretty good idea of how to do metric conversion.